Hi everyone, we're here today with Dr. Tom Lonsdale, who is in the UK for the summer. Best time to come to the UK, I think, if you're from Australia. So, top marks there. Yeah, it's great to have you. We're going to be having a conversation about cybernetics, and today I've got quite a lot of my students here. And also Carla was here. She doesn't seem to be here now, but she's going to be popping back in, I hope, as well, because
Mm.
she's had some experiences she wanted to talk to you about with her dog. So yeah, it's great to have you, Tom. And this is a even though it's an older published paper, this is something that you're talking about now. You're sort of revisiting it, if you like, to strengthen the messages that you have for people and the dogs and the way that we are feeding our dogs. Do you want to say hi and just explain who you are, just for those who may not have come across you before?
Can you say that thing again, please? Because I was coughing at the time, please.
Okay, if you can just explain who you are for those that may not have come across you or your books before.
Okay. Thank you. Well, wonderful to be here, and thanks for this opportunity to expand on what I consider to be the central topic facing dog owners and people the planet over. Um, so this was a big epiphany of mine way back in 1992, and it's been, what should I say, have been dormant for a long time, for all the wrong reasons. Um, as to who I am, well, I think you can see on your screens, I'm some old duffer from Australia. I'm 76 years of age. It's amazing. I thought I'd never achieve it. Um, I was a student in London, of course, and graduated from the Royal Veterinary College in 1972. Worked in and around the UK, large animal practice, small animal practice, zoo practice, worldwide fun, Woburn Wild Animal Kingdom, um, and so on. I spent some time in Africa. I went to the London School of Economics to learn more about how things fit together in the world. Um, but I dropped out because it didn't seem to provide the information. Actually, in hindsight, it did. And it's remarkable how I've been able to bring together all the different strands to come up with the cybernetic hypothesis of periodontal disease in mammalian carnivores. Now, you might think that's a bit of a mouthful, but we can break it down into its component parts. And I think I think ultimately people are going to see that this is vital new paradigm shift away from the existing systems that we use to derive information from the natural world. Cybernetics is way more powerful, it's more predictive, it's more explanatory of how the world works. And we can use this now. excuse, excuse me. We can use this system now because we've got computing, which we never had before. Um, the existing systems are dependent pretty much on the thinking that informed people in the quill pen age. In one of the illustrations, we've got somebody with a quill pen writing down how they worked out what's going on in the world. But now, with massive computing power and artificial intelligence, we can just leap over all of that and create a much, much better understanding. So, so there you are. So it's a bit about me, and it's a bit about an introduction of the hypothesis. Um, should I go on and say what it is and what it is not?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Look, this has huge bearing on how you feed your pets, how you feed yourself. and how you exist on the planet. So this is relevant whether you own 1 or 10 dogs or none. All of this is critically important for all of us. Okay, what it is, it's about communication and control systems within a framework. So this communication and control is going on in you and me and the whole globe on a massive scale all of the time. And it involves the microscopic, the communication within microbial communities and communities that exist within us and within the soil and within the air. And they communicate with our cells of our bodies. And our cells are part of our systems, our hematological system, our gastrointestinal system, our neurological, our hormonal system. All of these things are wonderfully interlocked and are communicating and speaking with each other all of the time. And the context is bigger again, of course, because we don't, excuse me, we don't exist in isolation. We exist in families and communities and nations, and we exist on the planet. So all of this is massively interlinked. Wow. Okay, so that's what it is. What it isn't is the current way of gleaning information used by scientists, vets, medics, people in general. And that consists of 3 different paradigms, basically. One is the reductionist paradigm, where we reduce things to 2 variables. Okay, for instance, you strike a match and you light a fire. Okay, but there's much more to that. How did the match get to be made? Where did it come from? Why did the person strike it? Why did he strike that in an oil refinery, knowing full well that it was getting, you know, don't reduce things down to simple cause and effect. It's much, much, much bigger. Kick a football and it sails off into the distance, but whether it hits the back of the net, a la Harry Kane that didn't last night, is to do with a whole host of different interlinked factors. Right. But cause and effect, the simple way that scientists run their experiments seeks to find a linear connection between 2 variables and leave all the rest constant. They may consider them to be risk factors, but actually they're determining factors, and there's zillions of them and they're going on all the time. So why did you limit yourself to that simple understanding? The other thing that it's not is the germ theory. So back to Pasteur, Lister, and the people who explored and discovered the first germs. And so there's been an obsession about germs and finding the singular, back to the unitary cause and effect thing. Find one germ that you're going to blame. That's the evil one. That's the nasty one. Okay, so it's not the germ theory, and it's not the treatment paradigm either. Treatment's good. We need it. We'll use it. But cybernetics is more about stability. It's about prevention. Prevention before prevention. It's not active prevention. It's just part of the system that holds together to maintain this homeostasis of the planet Earth. So all of this is going on simultaneously. Now, when I say that cybernetics is not reductionism, is not germ theory, is not treatment paradigm, that's true, but it incorporates those things. It makes use of those things. It builds on those things. So it's not restrictive. It's incredibly diverse, and it values diversity. So that's what it is, and also what it is not. how did I come to it? Well, look, for a variety of reasons, and I don't know why I was picked out to happen across this information and then try and disseminate it, but I was, and it was quite remarkable. Um, I attended a conference in Harrogate, Yorkshire, in 1989, I think it was, the World Small Animal Veterinary Association conference, and we were all in this B&B. And during the breakfast session, there was a Greek vet. I think his name was Midiakis, and I've lost contact with him, and I so regret that. He was the inspiration for me being here today. He told me about James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, a new look at life on Earth. And James Lovelock, Fellow of the Royal Society, wrote this brilliant book showing the interconnections of all things between the land, the air, the sea, the oxygen levels, and how it all hangs together as if it's one huge physiological organism. Subsequently, I heard Lynn Margulis on the radio. Now, Professor Lynn Margulis, was an eminent biologist. Previously, she had been married to Carl Sagan, the renowned astrophysicist. So her pedigree was absolutely amazing, and her insights in terms of how we evolved. And so we co-evolved on this planet. We all evolved together. We not the neo-Darwinian thing of the survival of the fittest, but the survival of the ones that cooperate. And she was able to show that in our cells, in our organelles, in the mitochondria and in the lysosomes and so on, all of these are in fact captured other bacteria. So in the early days, like billions of years ago, when eukaryotic cells were being formed, it was by gobbling up other cells. And so the development went on from there. And we have, of course, co-evolved. Just the other day, I was reading about at the Cybernetics page, somebody was talking about a cat and a mouse. And how does the mouse avoid being eaten? Does it become cat proof? No, that is not a solution. It occupies that zone of living with all the different components that are required for that: nesting, eating, mating, avoiding the predator, avoiding enemies, but not solely focusing on being cat proof. Look at the Serengeti. Look at the myriad different shapes and forms that occupy that place. And that place is regulated by the apex predators and the other predators beneath that. The lions, the cheetahs, the leopards, and then the hyenas, the jackals, and honey badgers, and so on. So this we start to see is really fascinating and very important. Now, another statistic for you. Let me clear my throat, excuse me. I just checked up yesterday to see how many human diseases are linked to periodontal disease. 57. Yeah. So our problems, the problems of the National Health Service, the problems of national health services the world over, is chronic diseases, not infectious diseases. COVID comes along, of course, and upsets the apple cart. But by and large, it's heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, cancer, chronic ill health of all manner of different shapes and forms, including Alzheimer's and neurological problems, arthritis of autoimmune origin, and so on. 57 different diseases. For dogs and cats, it's of similar order, but of course, because the pet food industry, dead hand, and the evil vets don't, in fact, research the important things, then they're missing out actually as to the significance of this. So from that statistic, you can see that periodontal disease, gum disease, is the critical factor in triggering and maintaining so many human and other diseases. In fact, it's far worse for dogs and cats because dogs and cats are the regulators, and the gum disease is their weak point, that they religiously maintain an effort not to succumb to gum disease, because gum disease has all these knock-on effects that affects all the other systems. And the way that they avoid gum disease and all the nasty catastrophes that follow on from that is to make sure that they rip, tear, and gnaw at their natural prey. That is their driving force. That's what they crave to do. They've been telling us this for millennia. Give a dog a bone. What does it mean? It means ripping and tearing and chewing obsessively. They can't get enough of it. They want more, and they can be persuaded to gnaw on cows' horns and cow hooves, and even on plastic bones. I don't know if you can see this plastic bone. Look at it. It's appalling. Some nasty man that decided to get rich quick making plastic bones and conning the community to buying them, who then the community then cons their animals to gnaw on the top. And you can probably see here that all the indents where the canine teeth and also the cheek teeth, the carnassials and so on, have ripped into that. The desperate animal so needing to clean its teeth and gums. They're all at that, but because they're speechless, they haven't been able to communicate that. And because the industrial complex, the veterinary junk pet food industrial complex has taken charge, then these questions don't get posed. And the vets don't ask these things, and they don't think about these things because they're caught up in the treatment paradigm. But unfortunately, the waves of people in the alternative sphere are no better, with their recipes and their formulas and their insistence that you've got to have this supplement or that supplement and so on, missing the main point that the dogs have been trying to tell us for eons. The cats don't gnaw on bones. How are they supposed to keep their teeth and gums in good order? Well, patience is their virtue. They'll sit by the mouse hole for hours upon hours upon hours, just in order to get not just the satisfaction, but the essential ripping, tearing, chewing, and the nutrients that go with it. So that is what this is all about. And it's mega, mega, mega huge. So any feeding system that leaves out the physical arguably leaves out the most important. Yeah. If it's in the can or if it's in the packet, it's an abomination. And the chemicals themselves, the product of chemical engineering or recipe book cookery, dreadful. Forcing the modified wolves and modified desert predators to consume stuff just to stay alive, but which does not fulfill all those other communication and control matters that we speak about. And if it's buff patties or prey model raw stupid percentages, it's a further con job. It's hijacking the debate and leading people away from actually the messages that nature has been trying to tell us for long enough, and which I wrote down in 1992. The reason I wrote it down in 1992 is because it came to me in a dream. Um, so there's almost a spiritual component here, because it was Christmas morning at about 4 in the morning, and I got it. Now, of course, the reason I got it is because I've been agonizing over all of this for long enough. I'd been wondering about um, why periodontal disease was so common, and common things are common for a reason, pretty important in the natural world, except it doesn't exist in the natural world for the most part. It's only in domestication where it's allowed to run out of control. So it remains as a potential disease, just waiting there, the bacteria just waiting to swarm across the gums when they're not cleaned, when they're not massaged, when that carnivore is starting to fail. And you need failing carnivores, because you can't have an all-conquering carnivore that eats everything on the Serengeti plain in the first 2 nights. No, you've got to have a balance. And the way you create that balance is that you make sure that the failing carnivore dies, and dies quite quickly, because you don't want them to hang around upsetting the balance, upsetting the prey species, failing to mate, failing to be a good, diligent member of the pride. You want them out. So, hello, hello. Hi, Caroline.
Caroline, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah, Tom, no, we can hear you fine. That was just a different audio that popped through for a minute there, but you're okay. You can carry on. We're all enthralled so far.
Right. So, I think where I was saying, look, this came to me in a dream, and what staggered me is that it came completely formed. It was as if all the pieces had been put together, and made whole, and I couldn't believe my good fortune that it resolved all my anxiety, my concerns about the inconsistencies were all made whole, and developed this cybernetic hypothesis of periodontal disease, drawing on Lynn Margulis, drawing on um, James Lovelock, of course, and and again a shout out to Migius, the Greek vet. These coincidences happened together, and I started to see. Now, this, in order to fully better understand the cybernetic hypothesis, you've got to cast your mind back in as best you can to a period when carnivores ruled the earth, before man picked up the club, before man developed fire, and then the technology that followed on. And then, because the mankind has now escaped from that simple evolutionary framework that we used to occupy when we were just wandering about the savannah, we were just one predator amongst many, but the apex predators would devour us. So what was happening at that time was, well, clearly the apex predators were never getting the wrong ingredients. It was either a case of get the right ingredients, another carcass of another animal, or no ingredients. So there are three determinants that ensure whether the apex predator survives: quantity, quality, and frequency of feeding provides the right quality, quantity, and frequency of nutrients that we now talk about. Mr. and Mrs. Caveman had no idea about proteins and fats and amino acids and such like. They didn't need to. They just chucked the residue of the carcass out of the cave for the waiting pack of wolves, and they would then get their right quantity, quality, and frequency of physical cleaning and massaging of the working parts. They get the right quality, quantity, and frequency of stimulating the brain chemicals, the right quality, quantity, and frequency of telling the stomach that something's on the way down and prepare yourself. You need to get your gastric juices going. Simultaneously, this would be telling the carnivore that it was a successful carnivore. So it would be stimulating the brain chemicals, which in turn stimulate the immune system, which then in turn stimulates all other aspects of the body. In so doing, because they've got the right quantity, quality, and frequency, they're a strong carnivore. They live to fight another day. Their teeth and gums are in pristine condition and all is well. And maybe later you can put up on the screen a schema, a diagram as to how this all links together and how we can make sense of it. But at the same time, we then consider the failing carnivore. What happens if they don't eat enough? Do understand that their food is always of the right sort. In domestication, it's all of the wrong sort. The nutrients aspect, the frequency, the quantity, quality, and frequency out of the can, the packet, or the bar slot is always wrong. Always wrong. But that never was of consequence to the lions and the apex predators and whatever on the Serengeti or whatever apex predators were around at the time. They never had to contend with wrong ingredients. All they had to contend with was getting the right quality, quantity, and frequency. Now, if, for instance, one of them got old or got injured in a previous hunt or whatever, then it arrives late to the feast. The others ostracize it, keep away, you didn't contribute. We're going to eat the wildebeest, the buffalo or whatever, and you can bugger off. Oh. And so we've got then this massive slide. This is the beginning of the end for that carnivore. It's not going to clean its teeth. It's not going to get the nutrients that it needs to maintain all the other body functions. It's going to get sore gums because they're not being massaged and cleaned. It's going to have a stinky breath. What's the stinky breath and the stinky saliva going to do? Well, the stinky saliva almost certainly is going to inform the carnivore that it's not well and it better start cleaning its teeth quick, otherwise it's in decline. But the stinky breath, again, that communication and control, that communicates to the other pack members or the pride members in the case of lions, pack members in the case of wolves, communicates that it's a failing carnivore. It has got a problem in its mouth. It's got gum disease. It didn't have enough massaging and cleaning, squeegeeing of the gums. So it's projected that information to all its pack members, pride members. It projected all that information at a distance, communication and control with the prey. They can smell that this carnivore is not up to scratch, that he's got a problem. They can then move away, but more slowly. They don't have to rush away from that carnivore because they know that it's a defective one. So this has assisted the prey. They have learned the communication and control there has informed them, and their behavior will then accordingly be different. And then they will live to run away another day. So all of these things subtly are interacting. And the fact of the matter is that for every carnivore, that is their ultimate end, when in fact, periodontal disease comes to grab them. It's the grim reaper for carnivores. It's the indicator that they're not doing their appointed job of regulating herbivores, because that's what carnivores are for. They're here not just to beautify the place, although they do. It's not for us just to marvel at their athleticism and their power and their extraordinary capabilities. No, they're here for a reason, to regulate the herbivores. And the herbivores then regulate the environment. And you may have heard that in Yellowstone was becoming a monoculture of the wrong spruce or fir trees or whatever, because the moose and the deer were eating all the saplings, and so it was becoming a degraded ecosystem until they introduced the wolves. And then they restored the whole thing, because the wolves then regulated the herbivores and the herbivores regulated the herbage, and then it all hung together wonderfully, wonderfully well. So it's big. Just maybe, Caroline, if you've got a picture of the diagram that you can just put up on the screen for people to see. Wonderful. Well, there we are. That was my original conception of this, and was published in the Journal of Veterinary Dentistry in 1994. 1994, that was available, except that one of these, I think it was, there were only three: toxins, microorganisms, and immune response. Collagenases and cytokines was not in the original diagram. It doesn't matter. Anyway, let's look. This is linear. It goes from left to right, but in fact, you can start anywhere. You can start with the heart and say, well, we've got a failing heart over on the right, which is going to affect how the bone marrow forms red cells and white cells. The failing heart is going to affect the musculoskeletal system. The muscles ain't going to work very well. They're going to struggle. They're going to put further pressure on the heart. And then the heart then is now starting to struggle. The kidneys then struggle, as does the liver, and so on. And that's where we're looking, just at that. So, like I say, start wherever in that matrix, and you can end up with the same dynamic equilibrium. But let's start over on the left here. Food. I should have put food and medicine, but we'll use the word food. Food actually means zillions of things. It means, like, I think 22,000 different biochemicals, something like that, in the human diet. But it means packaging, it means transportation, it means access, it means, in our case, cooking and preparation and eating and so on. So beware these words that mislead us. But anyway, talking about, again, the food of the carnivore, your dogs, your cats, and in turn for you, because this applies to people. Like I said, 57 diseases linked to periodontal disease now. So you got food on the left, the quantity of it, how much, critically important, the quality. You can't just have dry old bones, but neither can you have mince bar junk. And how often you feed that? Well, frequency needs to be thereabouts once a day, maybe once every 2 days, actually, once you're onto raw meaty bones. The needs for the correct balance of quantity, quality, and frequency is met by raw meaty bones. Then see that interface, and you see biological changes that occur at interface between the eye, the ear, the gums. And at that interface in the gums, which is so vitally important, the bacteria are lurking. Not individual bacteria, but in biofilms. They live in communities. So they have ecosystems within ecosystems. And if you don't have the right quantity, quality, and frequency of cleaning the periodontal interface, the bacteria come out. And then they send their toxins into the body. They move to the right. They send their microorganisms. that microorganisms are now found in placentas. They're found in brains deriving from the gums. And then that next one, collagenases, cytokines, vitally important, because the bacteria in the gums, they are able to trick the body into dissolving the connective tissue that holds the teeth in place. They use strong chemicals. And in dissolving the connective tissue, the body makes even more of the matrix metalloproteinases, which are intricate enzymes that dissolve collagen and dissolve connective tissue. That goes from the gums into the body. Where does it settle first? Well, it settles in the capillary beds. And what are the capillary beds made of? Well, they're made of extracellular matrix, which is collagen and connective tissue. So that's why people feel aching and sore and tired with a flood of these collagenases affecting all parts of the body. If you've got a rotten mouth, and if you're a dog and you've got a rotten mouth, then that's what's going on. And then, of course, immune response. These arrows are shown going both ways, because, of course, if the animal suddenly happens across a carcass that some other animal killed, but it got lucky, stumbled across it, cleaned up its teeth and gums, and started to feel healthier. And we'll come to that again in a minute. Aging, of course, has a major factor because, as I say, none of these carnivores get out of this alive, and aging will catch up with them eventually, as does time and environmental changes. If suddenly there's a wipeout in the prey species, well, watch out. Then the battle for survival becomes even more severe. So there we are. Look, just about that diagram, you can find that, of course, at the website. You can find it in Raw Meaty Bones Promote Health, the original book that told all about this. The original book that was plagiarized by the BAFAs and the prey modelers, and they made off with bits of information and left the vital information behind. But it's there. It's in Raw Meaty Bones Promote Health, and it's on the website, and you can return to that and learn more about it. So, Caroline, maybe drop that off now. Thank you. Because I guess I could then give you a couple of other anecdotes, stories about this and how this all started to coalesce. The Zubricki Silky Terriers, Tuffy and Blossom, were involved in the early days. Now, you call them Yorkshire Terriers. In Australia, we call them Silky Terriers. Anyway, delightful little dogs, wonderful clients. It kept coming back time and time again with these two little dogs. We vaccinated them, did all that typical vet stuff that's for the most part of little or no value, dispense worm pills and that sort of thing. But the constant concerns were for non-specific chronic sort of diseases, a manky coat, bad ears. One of them had what they called scurries. It would just suddenly go as if it were crazy and race off. Could never quite settle, and this, that, and the other. One time when the client came for annual vaccinations, that stupid stuff that vets do with little or no real long-term value, but we do it because we're expected to. I shouldn't disparage vaccines altogether. They have some value, of course, but really it should be a proper assessment of the patient, and it should be a case of providing preventative advice about how to keep your patient healthy. And clients don't ask for this information. That's the sad thing. They don't anyway. But I insisted with the Zubrickis on this occasion. I said, look, you've seen several vets in my practice, and none of us come up with an adequate explanation for what's going on with your two little dogs. But now's the time to be resolute. So if you will, I want you to book them in for radical dentistry. We're going to pull out a lot of teeth and we're going to clean up the rest. And simultaneously, you're going to have to feed them raw meaty bones. Well, of course, this was a bit confronting for the Zubrickis, who really have been coasting along with conventional viewpoints and thinking that they were doing the best, but nonetheless perplexed that their animals were never quite well. So I a little bit took control. It's hard when you've got paying clients that don't want to pay for the service and certainly don't want to do this radical stuff and lose half the teeth out of the dog's head and so on. Anyway, I said, book, first of all, we'll blood test them and just see if that gives us any window into what's going on with these dogs. Although blood tests are not much use because they're after the event and it's after the body's regulatory systems have been working overtime to maintain so-called normal. So that's why blood tests are oftentimes of no value or misleading. But anyway, I said, yeah, let's do these blood tests. We did them. Okay. They had low white cell counts across the board. And typically in veterinary parlance, that's because there's a failure of the either that there's no particular problem and the white cells can be in a low number, or that there's some deficiency in the production of white cells. Anyway, we put that to one side. We then booked the dogs for dentistry and pulled out half their teeth for both of them and sent the owners home to feed raw meaty bones, which for the most part was chicken wings and chicken necks because they're only little, but chicken frames. I don't know about the necks actually. There's a picture of one of them ripping and tearing at, I think it's a lamb raw meaty bone, and it's in an ABC TV show from 1993. You can see these Zubricki terriers coming back to life, silky as, they're glowing, shiny coats and in excellent condition. Right. Well, I'd asked Mrs. Zubricki to bring the dogs back for checkup, and she never came. So I thought, what's the problem here? Because clients wander off. They don't tell you why they're displeased or whatever. They just don't come back. Oh, dear. So, but I met her in the street one day. Oh, how you doing? Great. Didn't come back for the follow-up checkup. No, don't need to. The dogs are mended. Well, I'd like you to come back and let's do a comparative blood test. And so they did that. And this is all for free. I mean, we're doing all these tests and things for free in order to elucidate the problem. And of course, lo and behold, the white cells and the red cells are back into normal, so-called normal range. And again, corresponding with the health of these animals. So this is really, really, really good stuff. And I published that. It was the first time I'd used the term raw meaty bones promote health. And that article is at my rawmeatybones.com page in articles under Tom Lonsdale. You can see it there. So that was something of an epiphany. And I wrote and said, look, this is happening the world over. And all these animals that have been written off as being getting old and necessarily what do you expect when animals get old? They have problems with their teeth and gums and their skin gets a bit itchy and their hairs falls out and they have problems with their gastrointestinal tract and ear problems and cancer is, well, sort of inevitable. Right. All of which link back to the rotten mouth. There was another problem with the Zubrickis with that attitude that don't need to go back to see the vet, because unfortunately, once a diseased mouth is diseased, you've got to keep maintaining it as best you can. It won't self-maintain. It'll do as better on raw meaty bones than on any other system, but you've got to continue to oversee it, maintain it, and continue to, as a vet, to talk to your clients and show what's going on, and not to dismiss the fact that we've now got a stinky breath again and the teeth on one side are stained because there's a broken one on the other side, and so the dog is not using the left side of its jaws, only the right, for instance, and those sort of things. So this becomes intricate. It depends on understanding what you're dealing with, a conceptual thing about cybernetics and our existence in the world, none of which the regular vets have a single clue about, because their idea of nutrition is chemical engineering, is mixing the ingredients as if they were trying to make paint or something or other, get some different ingredients and put them into the pot and then say that there you are, we've achieved the nutrient balance, complete balance, and scientifically formulated. They're lies. They're out and out fraudulent lies. And it should stop. Now, I was going to tell you about, and I've told you about the Zubrickis. And what about the intervening years? Right. Well, the Zubricki article is there in 1992. The cybernetic hypothesis was formulated in 1992. Remarkably, it got published in 1994. And put that down to my meeting with Professor Colin Harvey, eminent periodontist, at a Sydney conference. And I think he went back to America and told them, look, publish Lonsdale's article, and it's their pride of place in the Journal of Veterinary Dentistry. So it's up there in lights, and I wouldn't change anything in it. On the page, I've actually reproduced what the front cover of the book looks like. There was no internet in those days, no faxes. I may have been faxes, but there was certainly no email, no web pages, none of that. And you can see it up there as the first article. And the editor is saying, effectively, this is so very important, and don't believe all the other stuff that you've been fed all these years, and have a look at Lonsdale's thing. So that's what happened then. But sadly, no one then picked up and ran with it, like no one. And it was a shocker, because we'd found the answer to so much. And yet the local vets around us, the vet association, and on would not have a bar of it. Far from it, actually. I had disciplinary actions against me. They tried to rub me out, to take away my practicing license. Mars sent 2 vets who then complained to the vet board. So they used the government regulator to try and regulate me out of existence. To the extent that in 1997, the best solution for me was to retire from practice, sell up all my possessions. So I had no mortgages, no staff, no commitments, no nothing. So that even if they did come after me, they couldn't take anything away from me, because I got divested myself of all these things. So I licked my wounds through the rest of 97 until 98, and then came out and started writing Raw Meaty Bones Promote Health, the book. And I wrote the book through 1998, 99, researched, reinterpreted so much of existing knowledge. The immune system is not just to protect the patient, it's to kill the patient as well. Periodontal disease, look at it as your friend in nature, is your enemy in domestication. So upturning so many of the different concepts. I wrote all that down in 13 chapters. culminating in chapter 14 about cybernetics. And that was in 1999. In 2000, we edited it. I had 2 lots of editors because of all sorts of problems. I had 7 lawyers help me make sure that I didn't get done for defamation. And in 2001, I had a printer all ready to go with a signed non-disclosure agreement so that they wouldn't tell anyone. They tore that up and said, no, we're not going to publish this book because we don't want to be sued. Luckily, I found another printer, published the book in August 2001. But in September 2001, the Twin Towers came cascading down in New York and the world stopped. And the postal system that I was dependent on to send these books around the world disappeared. It wasn't available. If you sent a box of books to America, they didn't arrive, not for another 3 or 4 months and so on. Catherine O'Driscoll and I had known each other from many years previous, and I sent her a PDF, I think, Catherine of the Canine Health Concern. And she then posted a really nice statement on her, at that time, webpage, because we got web pages by then. And from then on, the information spread across the globe. But with which, of course, the raw feeding community then decided that Billinghurst had conned them with his bath nonsense, stabbed him in the back, and went over to raw meaty bones. Ah, well, that's a good thing. That's an advance because we're getting away from bath patties and understanding the real issues. But what happened then, unfortunately, it was just a series of events where the hierarchy decided that there was no power, prestige, and profit for them in backing raw meaty bones as the sole food and medicine, and that they would come up with elaborate different recipes and ideas and back to the chemical engineering nonsense. Simultaneously, they had to suppress Raw Meaty Bones, the book. So they did. So they started off by saying, there's no other book out there worth reading. Indeed, all the other books, Billinghurst and the rest, are comic books. Raw Meaty Bones is the only book you should read. I agree with that. But they then went full circle and said, no, do not read Lonsdale's books. So that's what happened from about 2003 up until now, that the information has not been getting out as vital as it is. Now then, just the other day, I saw an article in the Journal of Periodontal Research where the periodontists, all the top periodontists in the world, these people who concentrate on gum disease, the gum disease that affects 57 different diseases of cancer and Alzheimer's and whatever in humans, we can't make progress because of our linear reductionist system. Our cause and effect model doesn't work. Well, of course it doesn't work. You're barking up the wrong tree. You're using the wrong methodology. So I then sent a letter to the journal editor saying, look, it won't work. You're doing it the wrong way. You're conceptually and methodologically, and that's why you're confused and you're wrong-footing yourselves. And you've got to see it from this cybernetic perspective. The journal editor came back to me and said, right, okay, we'll submit it down the regular channels and we'll see if we publish it. Before it was published, journal editor then sent another paper message to me saying, yeah, well, okay, you picked up that the regular way, the linear reductionist cause and effect model is not working and won't work. And he, the editor, Mario Ramondini, had recently published another article showing all the mechanisms of how you explain how a bad mouth leads to underweight babies and premature babies and cancer and whatever. And he said all of these different mechanisms, and your paper sits in the middle of these two things and says why your original system don't work for understanding these things, but why our mechanistic understanding of the pathways link into this, and that you, with your theory, unite all of these things together. And so he asked me to put in about his mechanistic things. I did, and the article is published. Well, it's 34 years after that Christmas morning when I came up with the idea, and here it is getting a new airing. Whew. Can't quite believe it.
Yeah, it's quite a story to hear. I recently interviewed Anna Heim-Bjorkman, and she was also talking about the peer review system, and how it's been limiting for them, and her sort of long-term journey over the last couple of decades, working out how to get things published more efficiently. So yeah, it's interesting to hear what's happened over that period of time in terms of getting the message out there, really. Can you put the links to these, the recent republished study? Is that what you gave me, or did you give me the link to the previously published study in the 90s?
I gave you both, I think. And in any event, people can find all of this
Okay.
at thepetfoodcon.com. And then if you
Right.
look at the carousel that runs across the top, the far right one, the last one, is about the cybernetic hypothesis. But you can get there more readily by the first pull down menu. And if you pull that down at the bottom, it's got the cybernetic hypothesis. It takes you to the revamp page. And we've revamped it to explain why what needs to be done to make the cybernetic hypothesis a theory, just like the germ theory arose out of Pasteur's work, and prior to that, Semmelweis finding that wash your hands and you don't kill ladies in the parturition ward, and so on. So they're vitally important things. But of course, what happened to those people who came up with those new paradigms? Well, Semmelweis died in the asylum. They carted him off because they thought he was mad. And so it goes. But so this it explains that. It explains the millions, the zillions of dollars that we can then start to save by using this different system. But it also on the website now explains why the current office holders, the journals, the politicians, the professors, the media just play safe and go with the existing system, because all of them, their power, prestige, and profit has been derived out of this nonsense that they've been peddling for so long. And so the whistleblower doesn't get much of a look in. So this has been the biggest problem. And like I say, and I will absolutely condemn the BARFers, the prey modelers, and the raw people. Righteous and wrong, they go on about minuscule things in the dog's bowl. There should be no dog's bowl. Why do you need a bowl to throw a raw meaty bone on the ground? The situation
Do
of
you think, Tom, that you could talk more about what you would like to see in terms of this quality, quantity, and frequency? So if we're sitting with a dog now and we're bath feeders, or we're feeding even kibble, what what would you say is the quantity, the quality, and the frequency, especially what you call the quantity and the frequency? I think we're getting an idea now as we learn more about farming methods what quality might mean, but what about quantity and frequency? Where does that sit?
Okay. Well, I'll come to that. I think they're good questions. It's a very good series of questions. Yeah, in practical terms. And in practical terms, let me just say that it's in each of the 4 books. So nobody need to worry if they don't get it here. It's on the website. It's on both websites, Raw Meaty Bones and on Pet Food Con. So that's there for free. The books I would encourage people to get and get a better understanding. And it's in each of the books what the quality, quantity, and frequency is, so that nobody need miss out. If they get the wrong book, it doesn't matter. It's in there. Work Wonders is the 120-page practical advice on the quantity, quality, and frequency, and how to go about it and how to acquire it and whatever. Let me digress just momentarily. I'll come back to the story, but a client came in with a chicken bone stuck, a cooked chicken bone stuck in the back of the mouth of this spaniel. But the spaniel was overweight. And I said, well, you got to bring it in because I can't get that bone out without giving an anesthetic. So I gave the dog an anesthetic. And whilst it's under, we'll clean its teeth. I don't know if we removed any teeth. I don't think we did. I think we just cleaned and took out the bone. And this dog had been a scavenger. It had been eating out of the trash can, out of the kitchen waste bin all the time. It, just was relentless. It wouldn't give up. And that's why it got this chicken bone stuck in the back of its throat. Right. I said, right, well, okay, you came to get the bone out, but I'm now telling you more important stuff along the lines of the cybernetic stuff that is the critical stuff that really should be told. And I want you now, your fat dog needs to lose 20% of its weight, something like that. It's a considerable amount. So from here on, please only feed it raw meaty bones, nothing else. You can give it occasional table scraps if you want, waste not, want not, but raw meaty bones, but only feed it alternate days. And this is the quantity I want you to feed it. Right, so terrific. Client who listened, who agreed, understood that dog being obese was not a good thing and needs to lose weight. How do you get a dog to lose weight? Well, you reduce the number of calories that go in. Simple. Feed it alternate days. Come back and tell us how you're getting on in a couple of weeks. Big beaming smile. Dog's lost weight. Clearly, it's in calorie deficit. It's getting less calories than it was before. So you would expect it to be even more ravenous and more attacking the waste bin, wouldn't you? But it wasn't. It's doing just the opposite. It was now content because it getting the right quality, quantity, and frequency of nutrients and teeth cleaning, and it had no further need to go and raid the garbage bin. Right. How powerful this is. So just going back to that numerical thing of how often, well, I just indicated every second day for a fat dog or a fat cat. But most dogs, once a day, miss a day here and there if you want. Don't worry about it. Give a plate of table scraps one day instead of your standard raw meaty bones. Give it a lump of liver now and again if you're a bit concerned about vitamin D and E and such like. But I shouldn't worry too much if I were you, because there's plenty of my clients that only ever fed chicken frames, and indistinguishable their health of their animals is against those that fed whole prey. There will be differences, but they're, from pragmatic purposes, insignificant. So the quality needs to be as close as you can to whole carcasses complete with fur, feathers, and fins. Fur, feathers, and fins. Ideally, that's what you feed. Fresh. If you were a responsible zookeeper, that's exactly what you would feed. Why do we have a lower standard for domestic animals? Well, because Mars, Nestle, Colgate, and the vets told you that it's okay. They gave you permission to do that. But I say that if you've got a zoo without bars, you've got an obligation to do the right thing. And we know what the right thing is. Fur, feathers, and fins. Give the guts and so on as well. Guts from a cow, a sheep, a pig, and so on, they tend to putrefy, and so you want to chuck those out unless you can get really, really fresh supply of those. But the guts of guinea pigs and rats and mice and rabbits, you can feed those. You can feed the guts of chickens too. With fur, feathers, and fins, yes. If you feed whole chickens, which you can, I knew a man, he wasn't a client of mine, but he had a breeding colony of 40 Australian cattle dog bitches. He just fed chickens from the local chicken farm. They die overnight, big heart attacks and so on. You can go and collect them and just chuck them into the breeding colony. And the poo comes out and he's got feathers sticking out of it. If you feed with fur, then you get fur covered pellets. If you feed just raw meaty bone chicken frames, well, it mostly just ground bone that you finally get out the rear end. I had problems early on with a litter of rough collies, and a couple of them, and they're getting spicules of bone stuck in the rectum and on the way out and creating pain and whatever. What that's to do with is by giving raw meaty bones that are too small, they get woofed down, overwhelm the stomach's acid production. So instead of getting dissolved in the acid in the stomach, they get shunted straight through and carry on down, creating pain as they're traveling down and then pain at the anus on the way out. So quality, close as you can to fur, feathers, and fins. Quantity, well, anywhere between 1% and 3% of body weight daily, and it depends on the animal. But you'll find that the Great Danes and the Pyrenean mountain dogs and such like need closer to 1% of their body weight, and the little dogs need higher, 3%. 3 times 7 is 20 in round figures. It's 21 actually, but 20% of body weight per week. So if you've got a 5-kilo dog, then 1 kilo of, for instance, chicken frames, rabbit pieces, whole fish. Don't miss out on fish. Wonderful in terms of the right fatty acids and so on. So throwing your animal a fish once in a while, and you'll see me giving my dogs fish in work wonders, and very good, and tend to be a cheap way of giving the whole animal. And of course, fish bones, people worry about that. Not at all if they're raw. I mean, they're soft as, it's cartilaginous for the most part, and they crunch, crunch, crunch. And it's a delight to see. And it's a delight to see how the animals chew from one side and then they'll rotate round the mouth and then back again. So they go chomp, 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 swallow. They've religiously cleaned all of their teeth and working parts all the way around. And that's such an integral part of this whole thing.
I think that's important as well for two reasons. One is that people are ever so worried about bits of bone in the BARF diet, which obviously we know that the raw meaty bones is your way forward. So that's interesting though, because those that do feed raw meaty bones always reply to these kind of comments with, when a bone is being eaten by a raw meaty bone is being eaten by a dog, they are chomping off chunks and swallowing it down. So what you also said earlier about the acidity issue, I think is key in that kind of situation. Really, the dog is not digesting the chunks of bone, and that's the issue, however they get into the dog's body. So also this idea of ripping and tearing, I've seen on my dog, if she has a rack of ribs, she will do exactly what you just said. Okay. But I have, apart from a teeny bit maybe with a venison neck, I've never in all her 14 years be able to get her to do this idea of ripping and tearing. Now she does have fantastic teeth and gums, but I've never seen this. And I don't know, this is a common thing, I think. People are worried that the dog is just crunching and swallowing. How do we get them? Is there a way to get them to do this ripping and tearing that you talk of?
Well, you can't talk to them and get them to change their ways, and you can't
Could
train them.
try. You could try.
But you can, basically, you've got to provide them with nutrients and the medicinal benefits. So don't worry too much about whether they do or don't rip and tear and whatever. Just feed chicken frames or whole chickens. That's the easy way. That's the cheap way. And if you can get boiling fowl, the hens at the end of lay, and you can get them complete with head and feet, you can just chuck them down and let them rip and tear or chew as best they will. My dogs have always got in the way of putting a foot on and ripping and tearing, even small pieces, even relatively small pieces of raw meaty bones or whatever. They will instinctively do that, and I've got pictures of Tatum in the Work Wonders book, where she's got a foot on and is flossing her teeth on raw meaty bones. But would you believe, I thought, right, well, this is great. And I was educating myself at these times, and I was determined to do the right thing. And I went and bought all these spent hens. I bought 30 of these hens from the local egg layer farm. And I kept them in a pen, and I proposed to give these hens, complete with feathers and everything, to my bitch, Tatum, who I feature, and she's also on the TV and whatever. She wouldn't eat them at all. I could not persuade her to eat these whole fowl. She had become so addicted to the commercial broiler birds, 6 weeks of age, that she'd been used to chomping on, and me giving her these old hens was something she was never going to come to the party on. And I could not persuade her. I tried every which way, keeping her hungry, cutting great rips into the meat of the birds, doing every which way thing I could think of, and they wouldn't do it. So I understand your frustration. I understand that you think the need. Don't forget, of course, unfortunately, in these situations, we're too late, because we're talking about animals that have already become accustomed, and humans that have become accustomed to feeding the addiction of their particular animal. Really, when the revolution comes, then none of this will occur, because no one will get a puppy that hasn't already been socialized and habituated in the nest. So once you've got puppies and kittens ripping and tearing in the nest, and then at 6 to 8 weeks, then going off to their new forever homes, well, they're already doing what the natural thing is, because they're fighting with their litter mates over the raw meaty bones. They don't stop ripping and tearing and chewing. That's precisely what they want to do. And that's what they will always do. Now, if you happen to have a dog with rotten mouth and skin and health and other issues, well, the best you can do now, pull the teeth, as best, such bad ones as you need to take out, and feed raw meat bones in big, big pieces, if you can. And the practical aspect of that, well, it'll depend on where you live and you know what access you have. But the easy, lazy man's way is chicken frames. And part of my story, as I said, they would try to destroy me. And I retired from practice in 1997. But in 2011, so 14 years later, I hit a financial crisis and I was in big bad trouble, and I had to reopen one of my practices. So I said, right, well, this time around, instead of just advising people to go off to the butcher or whatever, I will also offer raw meaty bones in freezers. So I got a whole array of freezers there in the Blythe Park Pet Health Centre. It's now called Rawsome Vets. And so you can go there and you can see on the internet all the freezers there and the big shipping container that we converted into a packing shed with a big freezer component at the back. And we decided we provide chicken frames. The best way, easy way, cheap way was to go to the chicken processing plant and get the carcasses after the meat had been removed from human consumption. We put those through a heat shrink system, individually wrapped, packed 10 kilos in a bag, and said, there you are, that's your basics. Whether it be a kitten, a Great Dane, a Labrador, or any other breed. Well, took off like wildfire. People now arrive in the car park with their car. They run in to the freezer and grab a couple of bags of 10 kilos of these chicken frames. So it's self-serve. They run into the reception, pay the money, run back to the car, chuck them in, and they're away. And that's pretty much all they feed. Sure, we recommend feeding bigger raw meaty bones. Sure, we do. We say give a lump of liver, feed a fish, give some table scraps. Most don't bother. Their animals are in the peak of condition. They shine like wet seals. The seals, that sort of seal I'm talking about, the one that swims in the sea.
Yeah.
And that's what they do.
No, that's a good answer to make the bone bigger than, because I think it happens a lot. You know, we sort of give them a chicken wing, or we just give them something too small, and then they don't need to do that. So I can see Carla's got her hand up. She isn't. Do you want to come on? Because I think you wanted to ask about gums, didn't you, Carla, or speak about gums in particular? She's just taken herself off mute somehow.
Yes, I found that really, really interesting, listening about the 57 diseases that gum disease can cause. I've had some, unfortunately, first-hand experience at this, and very expensive dentistry. I've got a French bulldog that are notorious for having gum issues. And I always thought our teeth and gums looked pretty good. Her vet thought that our teeth and gums looked pretty good. And then she, a few years back, snapped a canine. So I took her to a dentist. He's actually the top dentist in the UK, Bob Partridge. And when I got there, he was actually really rude to me and he was really horrible. And he was like, her gums are a mess, her teeth are a mess, she's got periodontal disease. And I was like, I honestly was so shocked because my vet had told me her teeth were really good for her age. So to cut very long story short, she needed extensive dental surgery over three times. She had lots of teeth out, and he showed me on a big screen X-rays of our gums and our bone, which were all like honeycomb. Um, and it was just really sad. But when I got the email back with all the x-rays and everything, even though they are the top dentists in the UK, they still recommend dental kibble, which is just so tragic. But just before Betty's dental surgery, um, I had been introduced to OxyPet, which I'm now one of the directors of. And OxyPet is a natural spring water and it has nano bubble oxygen in. So the nano bubbles are tiny, they're 10 times smaller than a red blood cell. So obviously when they are ingested, they follow the same diffusion pathway as normal water and nutrients into the gut and then into the plasma of the bloodstream. So I asked if I could have some water before Betty's dental surgery. And what we found was she was 13 at the time and she flew through the surgery. And what we found was her gums healed so quickly. The vet couldn't, on each surgery, the vet couldn't believe how quickly her gums had healed. And we've seen this across the board with people that buy and subscribe to OxyPet. The healing process when they're on OxyPet is phenomenal. And I'm wondering if that's because the gums are probably a low oxygen area, and then the oxygen is probably helping with the healing process. And I have noticed since she's been on this, her teeth are much cleaner. They don't seem to be getting as much plaque and biofilm on them as well.
Well, I'm not qualified to comment on adding supplements of the sort you mentioned, but I will mention that, of course, oxygenation of the gums is a significant factor because the bacteria that do the most harm in there are the anaerobes. They've been on the planet now for getting on for 3 to 4 billion years. They're the first forms of life that arrived here, and they like an atmosphere without oxygen. And so that's how they get deeper into the gums and create issues and so on. So, as an adjunct, oxygenation of the gums sounds logical.
Yeah, I mean, we
But
don't really we don't really class it as a supplement. It's a, I mean, I drink it as well. Betty's been on it for about coming up 3 years now. So I don't really class it as much as a supplement. It's a Cornish spring water, so it doesn't have any forever chemicals or anything. So it's just a very clean water. It's just infused with 10 times more available oxygen. So when the dog's drinking it, it reaches the peripheral tissues. So it's great for all different health issues. But we have, and the other co-founder, she's got a cat and that had some gingivitis. And once it started on the water, that gingivitis went. So I think the oxygen is definitely doing something. But what you've just said there makes perfect sense. If they're like low oxygen and then you putting more oxygen in, they're not going to like that. So
that's right. But
Tom,
I would encourage you to go back to the physicality because
yeah,
that the animals on the Serengeti Plain and in the forests of northern Canada and Alaska don't have supplementary
yeah.
water.
mm,
They have the ripping and tearing and massaging, and that
Yeah.
is nature's way.
So what would you
So
recommend for dogs? Because Betty can't, she just doesn't tolerate raw. I've tried a million times over the years. So I give her things like bull's pizzles, fairy ears, things like that, and she bites on those and rips them. And the bull's pizzles, especially when they go wet, they're quite sinewy. So she does kind of manage to clean her teeth the best way that she can without eating a raw meaty bone.
Well, I think we shouldn't pursue this because I'm not there and I can't act as your clinician at this time. I can only talk in general terms and say, unfortunately, you need a cluey mentor who is going to help you to make the transition. Unfortunately, you start with a French bulldog with all sorts of anatomical changes which predispose to gum disease. So that's your starting point. So once you start with a French bulldog or a toy poodle or a schnauzer or a borzoi or any dog that doesn't exactly mimic or reflect the wolf heritage, then they're going to be predisposed to problems. They need more raw meaty bones, not less. But unfortunately, they become habituated to the wrong stuff and won't comply. And for owners to, in their own kitchen and in their own lounge room, to try and overcome all of these cultural conditionings and predisposing situations, it's very, very difficult. I would recommend go and look at the case studies on thepetfoodcon.com and you will see the transformation. You will see animals where we pulled all the teeth out, changed the diet, and they've come back to health again, just in the same way as the Zubricki Terriers did in 1992. So we've been going on about this and publishing this. You mentioned Bob Partridge, one of my sworn enemies. He used to be on the Council of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons.
Mm.
I stood for the council on 27 separate occasions, 27 separate years. I think I had 24 consecutive years. Every year I stood for election, and you can see all of my manifestos, and it's all about we should not be engaged in this massive fraud and cruelty of imposing junk food on these helpless carnivores.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm the founder of No Bulges Natural Health for Dogs. I have over 114,000 members, so we always helping people to transition to raw and better diets and things like that. But for whatever reason, I've tried with Betty, but yeah, Bob is definitely a character, shall I say? I'll be polite.
She's a what? Say that again.
I said Bob Partridge is definitely a character.
Well, he's a sworn enemy of mine because he's done his utmost to ensure that what I've been saying should not be heard.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really sad. It's really sad.
Oh, he's vicious. It's a criminal. And indeed, if we got him in a court of law, I think near guaranteed an objective judge would judge him guilty and impose a severe sentence.
Yeah.
Seriously, seriously bad to oppose the natural teaching.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's what we're up against, though, sadly.
Does anybody else have a question or any thoughts? Just wonder whether, doesn't matter if you don't, you can put it in the chat if you'd rather not come on live, if you have a question. I think we've been here for an hour and a half, so I think some people probably need to go, Tom. It's been great to have you on and to hear the story of this. Tom also mentioned Catherine O'Driscoll. For those that are new to canine nutrition, definitely look her up. back in the day when we hardly had internet, when your books were just being published, Catherine was around. She was publishing some of the best books on canine nutrition. She has sadly passed. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago now. But yeah, a lot of the really, really good stuff happened in the 90s and the early 2000s, didn't it? Before the internet.
Yes, it did. But some people picked up on it and disseminated it, and some accurately, and that was a good thing. But it's very sad that otherwise a lot of this stuff has been lost and forgotten, but it's now being resurrected. And today, Caroline, what you're doing is this is the first podcast since the Journal of Periodontal Research paper. So this is effectively a restart 34 years after the initial conception.
Okay.
And I think congratulations to you for seeing the need and inviting me along. And I hope that we've done justice. There's always more. Of course, I would commend anyone watching to go to the cybernetic hypothesis page. Don't try and understand it all at once. Just keep going back to it, and each successive time you go back, you'll understand and comprehend more. Go to the case studies, because in the case studies you will see real, genuine instances where we take animals in extreme pain, extreme ill health, and transform them with a combination of dentistry and diet. And the two must go hand in hand. It's an abomination just to be talking about diet, because when people do, that's linear, and they talk about recipes and formulas. No, you've got to be talking about the real McCoy, the food and medicine, which includes the physicality. It's the physicality that the wolves want. It's the physicality that the lions and the hyenas need to clean their working parts so that they don't get bad breath and broadcast to the whole world that they're defective.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. Thanks, guys, for being here. We got some good comments anyway. Thanking you, Tom, from Emily and Jeanette. So yeah, I know you're all very busy. And for those watching on recording, also thanks for taking the time to do that. And I'll see you all again soon.
Goodbye to everybody. Thank you.
See if I can stop the recording, that is.
Thank you
Still
so
going.
much.
It's still going. Oh dear.
Thank you.
Changes things, doesn't it? I have to chop the end off this, I think, because normally you just click and it says stop record, and it's not doing that. It's just, here we are. There we are.